thank you for turning up this morning. Hopefully you'll learn something. Hopefully you'll take something away today which will help you save a few pounds at home, which is always a good thing. So my point here today is to help you save some money at home, but most importantly, it's really designed to help you do it yourself. So I'm David Newton. I've been in this industry for 45 years. Yeah, I know, I don't look that old, but there you go. Yeah, man and boy, as it were. So our objective today is for you to do something at home, for you to save your own money. Something reasonably simple, something which you can't, as it were, mess up. I don't think many of you are plumbers, and therefore are unlikely to understand how things work at home properly. So I'll go through that. And one of the things that researchers found is that with less knowledge at home about how things work, that lesser knowledge actually equates to a higher spend. And that's mainly because of fear. So let's look at how a heating system works. Your boiler, be it gas or electric or whatever it is, let's talk about gas today because that's the main focus. Your gas boiler heats water. It sends the water out via a pump to your radiators. That water's obviously then quite warm. When the water reaches the radiators, the bigger surface area of the radiator puts some of that heat into your room and makes your room warm. Now in doing so, it means that the water going back to your boiler is slightly cooler. So would anyone like to hazard a guess as to what we call the temperature of the water coming out of the boiler? Well, I'll tell you, it's called the flow temperature, okay? So the temperature that the water flows out of your boiler at. Well, this one's going to be a hard one. Anyone like to hazard a guess as to the name of the temperature of the water coming back? That's wise, the mayor, isn't it, really? The return temperature is quite right. Those two are very important terms, okay? Because a lot of people, especially gas engineers and whatnot, people turning up at your house, will talk to you about those things. And they're the secret for actually saving money. Now, does anybody in here know whether they have a combination boiler, a combi boiler or not? One hand's gone up. Would you put your hands up, please? Okay. Good. So, how do we know if it's a combi boiler? Well, mostly, you've got that one boiler on the wall. You don't have a hot water cylinder. You don't have an airing cupboard. The airing cupboard was taken away. Now, there is another type of system called a system boiler, where you keep your airing cupboard. You've still got the boiler, but you don't have that 24-hour, 365 hot water availability. If you run it too much, you run out. Today we're going to concentrate on the combi boilers, because the combi boilers are very, very easy to modify so that you can save money. Very easy. So most of the time, the flow temperature coming out of the boiler is around 70 to 80 degrees centigrade. Now, you know it's that warm because when you go and touch it, you cannot leave your hand on it. It's too hot. And it's one of the things that, you know, all of us who have got kids say, don't touch the radiator, it'll burn you. You know you've got that system and you know you've got that flow temperature when that occurs. What we're really seeking is something that's not too hot, something that's not too cold. We're seeking that just right, the Goldilocks temperature. So, who has had a boiler fitted since 2005? Right, well, all of you can save money, all of you. In 2005, the regulations, the government finally understood that the old boilers we had, the ones with pilot lights, they were consuming far too much energy and they were not particularly efficient. So in 2005, it was made mandatory that only condensing boilers are fitted. Now, what a condensing boiler does is it recovers extra heat from the exhaust gases. It's very simple, but it has to work within a certain temperature range. Anyone had their condense freeze up over winter? You remember a few years ago, 2010, I think it was, when it got really cold, and lots of people had their condensate freeze up, and so their boiler stopped. Well, that trickle of water that comes from your boiler is actually your boiler being very efficient. So the great news is that all of those boilers, all those condensing boilers, are actually over 90% efficient. So the salesman would have come round and said, same as British Gas do at the moment on the TV, or you can save this amount of money, that £500 and all this kind of stuff. The truth is, you can do that, but most overwhelming majority, over 90% of the boilers that are installed, do not operate at that high efficiency level. They do not meet the criteria that they were originally designed for. So one of the things you're going to learn today, or hopefully the main thing you'll learn today, is how to take your boiler down and so it operates very, very efficiently without losing any form of comfort. None whatsoever. So, yes, that's our opportunity to save some money. So why does it all work? How can we save money? How can we really benefit? What's the secret? So here is a bit of a complicated diagram. You've got the light blue across the middle there. Let's assume that that's the temperature you want your room at. Okay, let's say it's 20 degrees. The red line is one of the boilers that most of you will have, and that's heating the water up to about 70 degrees. Now, water is a very efficient medium for carrying heat, but it takes an awful lot of energy to actually heat it up. So what you'll see is this, I don't know if you see it, can you see that little dot? As you can see, that's the place you want to be, but when you run the water at 70 degrees C, it goes all the way up. It becomes too hot in the room. At home, before we changed ours, it would be that endless cycle of, oh, I'm too hot, can't you turn it down a bit? And then you turn it down too cold, and it was a bit of a pain. So the real thing you're looking for, the Goldilocks, is the blue line, where it goes just above the temperature you want, and then just below, and then turns back on. So it stays, as far as we're concerned, as a human being in our bodies, we don't really notice that. It stays nice and even. So yes, and that's really achieved by turning your flow temperature down to around 55 to 60 degrees. Come and sit down, if you want. So by turning your flow temperature down to about 55 degrees, you'll find that the room is a much more even temperature, a much more comfortable temperature. And you can sit there if you just don't notice. And that's the secret, really. That's the Goldilocks bit. You can see, for any of you going back to school and the area under the curve, that distance there that's highlighted by the arrow is actually wasted energy. That's stuff you're paying for to heat your water, to sit there and to actually be slightly uncomfortable and too warm. As it says, it's what you're spending, and you don't need to spend to maintain your comfort levels. What we're looking for is Goldilocks. We're looking for that nice, even temperature throughout the whole thing. So the secret, of course, is how do we do it? Well, the first thing I can tell you is that if you've got a combination boiler, you cannot mess it up. No matter what you do, what you turn, you can turn it back. And no boilers, homes, kids, dogs will be harmed in the turning of that dial. Right? So I would advise you, I would encourage you to have a little play. The very, very worst thing you can do is put it back to where it was. And the only thing you can do is spend a little bit more if it goes the wrong way in the short term, and a little bit less in the long term if it goes well. So please be reassured that you can't screw it up. There are normally 2 dials on, or 2 lots of buttons on a combination boiler, a combi boiler. The one that has a radiator symbol, like you can see here, they come in various shapes and sizes, obviously, that will be for your heating system. It might, to us, it might make sense to write down heating, but of course, manufacturers want to be clever, so they put a symbol on that nobody understands. So that's a dial that you can turn, but also there's another dial you can turn, and that's your hot water temperature. I would guarantee, and I'm not a betting man, I'd put a whole 10p on it, that at least 80% of you will have your hot water turned up to maximum. Now the strange thing is, you'll run a wash it up bowl full of hot water, and you'll go away, do something, come back, and the bowl's full of nice piping hot water, and then you'll go and add some cold water to it to make it usable. Just think about that for a minute. So you've paid good money to heat the water up to its maximum temperature, and then you pay again to reduce it to something usable. I'd call that a definition of madness, really. We've all done it, and it's only when somebody sort of brings it to your attention that you realise, oh yeah, perhaps that's not quite the sensible thing to do. Wrong way, that's it. So with all of these dials, all of these buttons, generally the dials turn right, so clockwise to go up, and they turn anti-clockwise to the left to go down. Really simple. Sometimes when you turn these dials, there is on the screen a display. So as soon as you touch that display, or touch the dial, a temperature will come up, or a number will come up. And by doing that, you can accurately adjust it. On some boilers, they don't have that display, so that you have to kind of judge it a bit, but we'll come on to that in a minute. Ideally, you should have your temperature of the heating flow temperature at 60 degrees as a maximum. 60. That's invariably around 12 o'clock on the dial. Now, when you do that, what happens is your boiler suddenly goes from being 75 to 80% efficient up to close to 90% efficient. That's free money, genuinely free money, in your pocket for a simple turn of a dial. You you're thinking, what's the catch? Why isn't it like that? Well, you know, that's the way it is. All of the manufacturers at the moment still say that your heating flow temperature should be 70 degrees C. All of the manufacturers do that. Now, they do that for a number of reasons, but the principal reason is they don't want technical support calls. The plumbers, the installers, don't want you ringing them and saying, my rads aren't very warm. Now, a little story. My mother-in-law, bless her, late mother-in-law, that's it. When she was disabled, so she would sit in the window next to the radiator. Whenever the radiator went off, because the heating had reached its temperature, you'd get, Ken, there's something wrong with the heating. It's gone off. What's wrong with it? It took me 2 years, that's because it wasn't red hot. It took me 2 years to eventually convince her that actually it wasn't anything wrong with the system at all. It was just that the room had got up to temperature and the pump had stopped circulating that hot water around the system. Over that 2 years, I also gradually, very gradually, turned the system down. I turned the flow temperature down. That's because my father-in-law had the nickname of Econ. So he never wanted to spend any more money than necessary, which is fine. So you do find that the temperature going through the radiators is slightly less than it was before. It will mean that your room might take 10 minutes more to heat up, but not significantly different. But you do save lots of money. Okay, yep. So the other thing you do with your hot water is to change that dial too. You can change that dial so that instead of having 65 degree water or 60 degree water, you run that down at somewhere close to 50 or 55. If you shower, 50 degrees is more than enough. Very few people have it anywhere near that warm. Normal showering is 43. If you have a bath, then you can put it up to say 55, because when you put hot water into a bath, you lose some of the heat. But again, you turn that dial. I've got a handout here that's written by some colleagues of mine, some female engineering colleagues, which are all happy to have, that will show you how to use this and what to do with different boilers. But basically, that's what you can do too. Now, for those of you without a combi boiler, with a system boiler, so you've still got an airing cupboard, you can change the flow temperature, but you can only take that down to around 63 degrees. That's because your hot water has to be separately adjusted. So one of the things I would suggest to you is, if you don't have a combi boiler, then you seek some assurance from somebody who knows what they're doing, so they can help you reduce those temperatures safely without you spending more. If you just go and change it willy-nilly, it is possible that you'd end up spending more. So there are two things that need to be done in tandem, and they're not as simple as a combi boiler, but it is still possible. So, summary, don't be afraid to try. Do it a little by little. My wife gets in the car, and if she's cold, she turns it all the way up. And if she's warm, she turns it all the way down. Turn it a little bit at a time. Give it chance. Have a bit of patience, right? And you can then save some money. Whatever you do, the worst case is you can put it back to as it was, and you will have saved. Have a try. So, as I say, a lower flow temperature equals lower gas consumption equals saving money. And as I say, lastly, if you feel this has been useful, share it with other people. You know, friends, family, neighbours, and everyone can then do their bit for the environment and their own wallet. Thank you.